Hi there and welcome to another episode of the Colton Boutique Wine Show. I'm your host, Senior International Director Daniel Patterson. With me today is a very special guest all the way from Australia. He is one of the most influential people in the fine wine world and Barossa. Famous for his collaborations with some of Australia's most exclusive vineyards, many of which we at Colton Boutique are very familiar with, as well as our clients and the fine wine world in general. Vineyards such as Two Hands, Chris Ringland, Glates of Barossa Valley, John Duval Wines, to his very own vineyard, Dymchurch. Without further introduction, our guest, a fifth generation grower, sixth generation on the property, and one of the most important barons of Barossa and influential advocate for the Barossa Valley, Adrian Hoffmann. Adrian, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Just come back from got on a long flight, so here for I suppose a short stay coming across. Don't generally like travelling during the growing season because it's probably the most important time to be in the vineyard this time of year, but took the opportunity to come across and catch up with you guys. So
right,
thank
brilliant.
you.
No, thank you too. And I believe obviously we have this tasting that we're going to be doing this evening, which should be very exciting.
I'm actually looking forward to it. I really like, I suppose, showcasing wines from my vineyard and especially wines that I'm involved in with Chris.
Oh, definitely. And you mentioned, is it just today that you've arrived in the UK, or was it a couple of days prior?
No, only arrived yesterday, so I don't suffer too much jet lag when I'm coming over here. Generally suffer the jet lag when going home, so I tend to find if I'm going with the time zone, not too bad. If I'm going against the time zone, that's when I tend to suffer a little bit, so yeah.
Fair enough. And how long are you planning on staying within the UK or even Europe for?
I'm only in the UK for 3 days, and then I've got another tasting, another dinner in Frankfurt as well. So our distributor over there, Mr Nothis,
wow.
He'll be hosting me. So yeah,
lovely. And I'll take you be sampling some of those Rieslings you enjoy there too.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoy my Rieslings. I still like those semi-sweet Rieslings, so they're very nice.
Oh,
yeah.
Very good. And for the people who may want to know more about yourself and your history, how did your journey in wine begin?
Well, I suppose I grew up in the industry. I've always lived on the property, but when I grew up on the property, it was quite different. It was, I suppose, it covered all different aspects of agriculture. We had sheep, we had dairy, Grandma ran chooks as well, we had apricot trees. So that all sort of, I suppose, come to a head when I was leaving school because my grandfather sort of said to me, do I want to be a dairy farmer? And I said, well, the idea of milking cows morning and night for the rest of my life wasn't that appealing. And we didn't have a huge amount of land either, so the option to go bigger with cropping or sheep wasn't there either. But we were very well positioned, I suppose, in the Barossa with where our vineyard was and the land that we had for vines. So all the way through the 90s, I suppose, I grew the vineyard organically. So as people asked for more fruit, we basically grew those vines. So we started planting in 92, the year I left high school.
Oh, wow.
And we just grew, I suppose, our Darwit's block and our home block Shiraz. And as we sort of took away paddocks, I always ran a few beefy cows. So I had a few beef cattle, but then we ran out of paddocks for that as well. So
Right.
so I took the property from a modest 20 hectare to what we're now at about 140 hectare.
That's amazing. Okay, and obviously with you being a fifth generation grower, sixth generation on the property, as we touched about at the beginning of the show, some would see that as a lot of pressure. Was there ever any doubt that you was going to continue in the footsteps, and was there anything else that you thought about doing outside of wine?
I suppose because of the downturn in the industry in the 70s and definitely the 80s, my dad actually went into general engineering. So he went into motor mechanics. So when I actually left, as much as we still looked after the grapevines, I suppose I was actually studying welding at the time. So looking at going into, I suppose, metal fabrication and shed building, which was my dad's business, Hoffmann Construction. So we built quite a few sheds around the place, and we were known for the quality of sheds that my dad built as well. That they weren't going to blow down in 1,000 years, sort of thing. I think you could build them in the tornado alley in the US, and I don't think they would have blown down. They were always over-engineered, so to speak.
Yes.
So that's most probably where I spent, I suppose, first 4 years after high school. But we still had to look after the vines, and we're still planting a few blocks slowly. But then I suppose the bug really bit me in '99 when I became young ambassador for the Barossa.
Yes.
But I also studied at TAFE prior to that as well. So done a level 3 in viticulture. So I suppose for me to get a better understanding of more modern day viticultural techniques, because everything I was learning from my grandfather, and it was always it was good to learn from him, but it was also good to learn, basically learn from my grandfather about how things were done, and why some of the things were done as well. And he was most probably a very good teacher, because he allowed me to make a lot of mistakes along the way as well. So mistakes, things that he would have actually learned through his course of growing grapes, but he was happy for me to do, because you tend to learn more from what doesn't work than the successes.
Yeah, correct.
So and that's still happening to this day now. So you're trying to experiment, and you're always trying to think you're doing something better in the vineyard or something different, but generally most of the time someone else has done it before. And you try and learn. You want to talk to people within the industry and learn from their experiences as well.
No, definitely. I think you make an excellent point there as well. In life, there is too much focus on not making mistakes, but whereas school may punish you for making mistakes, life actually rewards you for the mistakes in which you make, because you're always going to be learning from.
Well, I think that's what puts you to the next level in whatever you're doing, whether it's grape growing or whatever I suppose journey you are in life. You learn from your mistakes. As long as you learn from your mistakes, and then you can achieve better, and the outcome's better at the end, it's always going to be great. It's a bit like with the cricket and stuff like that.
Yes.
You get a bouncer and you keep on swatting at it, and you keep on getting hit on the body. Eventually you learn you're going to actually have to hit the ball if you don't want it to hit you. So
that's true.
Yeah.
No, very good. And with regards to that, of course, mistakes are always going to be there. However, with the challenges that you've been faced with along the way, again, aside from once when you were challenged by, I think, another grape picker.
Yeah, it was a female grape picker, and it was to get to the end of the rows. I was sort of trying to motivate them a little bit, and I think I was on a lose bet. I think at the end of the day, because if they beat me to the end of the row, I had to drop my pants on the bonnet of the tractor, and if I was to get there at the end of the row, they would. She was going to do the same, and most probably not the most attractive lady to be doing it, but that's the way it goes. So
we mustn't grumble, that's for sure.
No, that's right.
But obviously, with regards to that, have there been any other general challenges that you did face? I know you mentioned initially, again, taking the hectares from 20 hectares to over 100 hectares must have been quite taxing at the time.
It's something, because it happened organically. It wasn't sort of forced. We weren't going out and planting. We've never had an issue with oversupply on our vineyard. People talk about oversupply in the industry in the 2000s. We sort of didn't have that issue, because our fruit is always sought after.
Yes.
Some of the biggest challenges that we've got is, I suppose, mitigating against, I suppose, the changing environment that we're dealing with. This year, we're dealing with some extreme hot weathers. We had a hot windy event during our flowering, which allowed for a poor set. But in saying that, if we didn't have the poor set, we would have had to start dropping fruit on the ground. So each year's got those challenges. 13, 14 and 15 for us were very challenging years, in frosted years in the vineyard. We've spent a lot of money on our frost mitigation, but for us it's all about trying to I suppose for us it's trying to mitigate against those risks, getting extra water so you can actually supplement water the vines to make sure that they're healthy and green enough, for frost to protect your vines during spring. So for me it's the challenges of how do we now, that one hot day has sort of really put a bit of a dampener on this vintage from a grape growing point of view.
Yes.
But from a winemaking point of view, the winemakers are rubbing their hands together, because they're going to be looking at lower yielding crops. They'll look at more concentrated fruits, smaller berries, everything that they like about a great quality year.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't think quite the volume of fruit's going to be there that's going to be pleasing to anyone, especially the consumer, because there will be a much smaller vintage, but the quality's going to be fantastic.
Okay, and will that normally then result in maybe a slightly higher price? Or?
Yeah, I don't. It's not a trend in Australia. If we were to try and compensate with pricing, we most probably should be nearly having to triple the pricing of the wine. But you're not going to see that. Generally, we're a lot more restraint in Australia when it comes to some of those better quality vintages. We're not just going to ramp up the price because it was a better vintage.
Sure.
Especially from, I suppose, Chris and my perspective as well. What we're trying to do is create something unique, something that's a little bit different, that is going to last beyond the generations, and we don't want want to just ramp the prices up for the sake of it. I think we've with the Dimchurch and Hoffmann we set our price as a bit of a benchmark, and I think we're holding that price there because I think it is an expensive wine, but the people that are buying the wine is getting value for money.
Oh, massive! When you consider the cost of Dimchurch and Hoffmann compared to some other wines from the New World and the Old World, which similar quality, some are less, and they're asking for more in terms of what you're actually offering cost per bottle, even though like you said, it could be on the more expensive side. In the grand scheme of things, it's actually worth the money for the contents in which you're getting.
Definitely when you're talking about Chris, who I deem as one of the best Shiraz winemakers in the world, and the attention to detail that I put into my vineyard, and especially the parcels that go into high-end products, not just the Dimchurch and Hoffmann, but the Torbrick Runrig, the Glatzheim and Ra, the Two Hands Aries, all those super quality, and it's not all the same fruit. How I grow for those different winemakers is stylistically quite different. The soil types it's on is different as well. But when it comes to the Dimchurch and Hoffmann, it's really about going through the vineyard and tasting the fruit and seeing those very minute differences between the vines and between the fruit, and making sure that we're getting the best of the best fruit from my vineyard.
Yeah, definitely. And with regards to that, actually, in your opinion, what does make Australian wine so special, and what makes your wine special too?
I think what makes Australian wine special is what we don't have to do. It's very interesting. There are sites that are dry grown, and we can dry grow on what I would say is a normal or an average growing year. We can do quite a bit of dry grown fruit in those years. A lot of times we're doing supplementary irrigation, but we don't have the same chemical inputs. We don't have the same inputs into our farm. We introduce a lot of organic matter, organic carbon. So reclaimed green waste from the township of Adelaide. They break it down into a compost. We put it in the vineyard. That helps with soil moisture retention. The vines are just remain healthy overall.
Yes.
A lot healthier overall. So when you start looking at, I suppose, how it's more so the little things that we do, but we don't, the chemical inputs from a spraying point of view. This year has been quite a dry year, so basically put on 2 post flowering sprays, and we haven't done any sprays after that. But then we're still going through and putting kelp products on to alleviate the stress on the vines as well. So we've got those. It's always trying to work out what is the best for the vine for that given year, and each year is slightly different on how we're going to treat those vines.
And would you say that's more experience that then plays a significant role in predetermining that, or would you call in other people to offer a second or third opinion?
Generally, I'll always bounce ideas off of other growers. It's crystal ball gazing to a certain degree, because you're looking at how far you're looking into the future. Is December going to be wet? Is it going to be dry?
Right.
Everyone was sort of predicting a dry season, so you have it in the shed. You have the arsenal in the shed ready to go, but if you don't have to use it, well, why use it?
Yeah.
And Chris's approach to winemaking and our approach to selecting the wines is no different. It's what you don't do during the ferment. It's what you don't do during the maturation process. People sometimes are going in and topping up their barrels every month. When we're topping up our barrels, we do it twice a year. We adjust do sulfur checks and adjustments once a year as well. We're not trying to manipulate what's actually happening. We're just letting the wine tell us. I'm letting the vineyard tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Chris is letting the wines tell him what to do. And it's very much a hands-off approach to actually produce the quality that we get. It sounds a little bit silly, but if you're starting off with some really good products to start with, whether it's the fruit, whether it's the oak, I think you can make some pretty fantastic wines. And
would you say like the soil can also play a role, or is that just a myth?
That's most probably. I won't get into it too.
Terroir. The
terroir. I wasn't going to talk about the terroir, but I suppose the true expression of terroir is the vines on their own roots. And unfortunately, I know Europe and America, they have to grow on rootstocks. So and I've got trials where if I have to go to rootstocks, working out what best rootstocks we can use in the Barossa, but at the moment we can plant a lot on our own roots, so you're getting a true expression of terroir. So I'm in a unique situation. My grandfather always told me, when God created the earth, he dumped all the different soil types, that was left over out at Ebenezer.
Oh, wow.
Because, we've got, 2 kilometres within a 2 kilometre radius of my house, we've got 7-foot sands, we've got red-brown earth soils over red clay, we've got bisky soils, we've got bisky over lime, we've got limestone through it, we've got sandy loams, we've got creek gravel on top of hills with washed quartz and ironstone through it as well.
Wow.
So you've got this myriad of different soil types, and I think that's how we can get so much complexity into the Dymchurch and Hoffmann. We've got this myriad of different soil types, and every year is slightly different. A general rule of thumb for me is a sandy, loamier soil will produce really good fruit in a dry year.
Yes.
Your heavier soils, such as your biskies and your clays, they'll produce your really good fruits in those in the wet years, because the soil really wets up, and in those wet years, the sandy soils just give that moisture to the vine too quickly, and you can end up with too much vegetative growth and a bit more shading, so you can end up with a bit of green, underripe tannins and things like that as well. But on those wet years, those heavier clays only give up that moisture very slowly to the vine, so the growth is regulated all the way through. So even on those wetter years, you can really produce some heavy concentrated wines.
Yes.
Maybe not going into 2017. That was a little bit too generous.
Right. Okay.
But that's where we had to work a little bit harder and make sure we actually ripen the fruit on the vine.
Sure.
I suppose our limit lodge Cabernet Mataro, because Cabernet really thrives in conditions like that, and we produced a very special Cabernet Mataro in 2017 as well.
So that's one to keep an eye out for sure.
Yeah.
Good. And obviously there's been more news which has come out today about the unfortunate circumstances surrounding Australia, obviously with the wildfires and what's been ongoing in more recent times, loss of human lives, loss of hundreds of millions of wildlife, forestry, people's homes, vineyards and so on. In your opinion, is there a genuine issue with global warming, the likes of what Greta Thunberg will talk about? And if so, how can we make that change?
I think everyone's got to do their own little bit. I think my family's been doing that for generations already. So, we've got sections of our property that we've actually created as nature corridors, so wildlife can actually move through it. I suppose we look at the environmental impact of what we do. I was sort of talking before about our organic vineyard, and our organic vineyard most probably uses slightly more water than what our traditionally grown, what our traditional vineyard is actually using. So, is organic better in that circumstance because it has a slightly higher environmental impact from a watering point of view, which is quite an important issue in Australia as well. But I think really it comes down to the management of our natural resources as well. Yes. 200 years ago, the Aboriginals would have lit a lot of small fires every year, clearing out different areas, and you wouldn't have these big wildfire blazes and things like that as well.
Okay.
So it's now getting to, people don't want, and it's a big issue doing these controlled burns, and you only get a very small period of time, generally in sort of April and May, to do these fires before winter sets in, and reducing of the fuel load in some of these areas just wasn't done and completed in time, or they haven't been aggressive enough to do it. So then when you get a dry fire sparked on a hot day, you get these mega fires as well.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a climate change skeptic. The numbers are there to say, we're increasing carbon into the air and things like that, into the air as well. But it's not fair to blame, one country or another country that's not doing their thing. We're getting a little bit political now, but for me, I think if everyone can do their own little bit to help, whether it's just recycling, and that's where, coming back to our compost that we're putting onto our vineyard, using that recycled green waste from Adelaide, I think that's us doing our little bit to help. We haven't sort of done the numbers on what we're doing, but we'd be fairly close to carbon neutral on our property. I know that's a big credential for a lot of wineries to sit there and work out the numbers and be carbon neutral as well, knowing that when a bottle of wine arrives at your place, that all the thought about the environmental impact and the carbon footprint of that product has been taken into consideration consideration.
Yes. Okay. And on a more positive note, the Australian vineyard tours are legendary. They're up there with some of the best, if not the best. People speak about the Napa Valley wine tours, the Bordeaux wine tours, the Rhone wine tours. However, if anyone was, listening to this or watching this, and they wanted to come to Dymchurch Vineyards, what can they expect on a wine tour?
Well, we're looking at actually setting up for basically a wine experience. So getting people on to actually give them a bit of better understanding. I think just in grape growing in general, I think there's a lot of myths out there about what makes good fruit and how good fruit is grown. I think for me, we've got multitudes of different blocks. So we've got about 12 different blocks, but within each one of those blocks, we've got different management techniques, and this is what comes back to the 30 odd plus wineries that I deliver to, and the producers that I deliver to, because they're all looking for something slightly unique and different. But if they were to come out and have a vineyard tour, I definitely always like to show them the elevation. Getting them up, looking across the valley and looking down the valley, so people can understand the Barossa Valley isn't just one valley. It's made up of, I think several different valleys, because you've got the Lindock Valley, you've got the Greenock Creek Valley, you've got the Barossa Valley proper. We're most probably, even though we're the Barossa Valley proper, all our land actually flows out to the north. So we're in a little niche microclimate as well, and I think that's what makes the North Barossa so special. And then within Eden Valley, you've got Flaxman's Valley, you've got Eden Valley, then you've got the valleys out towards McCulter as well, where Henschke's Hill of Grace is, and things like that as well.
Oh wow!
So it's quite complex in the nature, and for people to come out and explain to them, why the Barossa is such a diverse, region, and why we can produce the wines that we can with the diversity that we can. I think that's really, in essence, what I like to get through. And when you come onto my property, I'll take you to that sand. You basically, it's silica. It's like going to a beach.
Okay.
And then we'll go to the next place where you can pick up the ironstone and the quartz and the washed rocks from the top of a hill. So because it was all the part of Barossa, it was at the bottom of the ocean at one stage, and it's sort of raised up out of the ocean. But Australia's got very, very much ancient soils, and what we're doing to protect those ancient soils as well. So, my philosophy on growing fruit and getting that people excited about what I'm actually doing, because when I took on the property, my focus was to hand it on to the next generation in better nick, and I know I've done that because I've got the numbers to back me up. The organic carbons in the soil I've increased by 0.5%, which normally takes a lifetime to do, and we've managed to do that in 20 years. And the soils are only going to get better, and it's getting people to actually understand that you're not just buying a bottle of wine, you're buying into the philosophy of what Dymchurch and the Hoffmann wines are all about.
Massively. And with that next generation, is that children? Are they cousins? Are they?
My thing is the next generation is giving opportunity to any young person that wants to do farming. I think the dream of leaving school and becoming a farmer and owning your own property, I think that's nearly non-existent now. People are struggling enough to buy their first house, let alone buy a farm and a property. But for Dymchurch Vineyards, it's whether it's my kids or my nieces and nephew, or the next generation of my workers to come along and work on the property. I think giving people that opportunity going forward. My son is doing viticultural operations at Torbreck, so basically the same study that I was doing nearly 20 years ago. Now he's basically doing the same studies, but his plan is to come back onto the property. But it's good to go away and find those experiences, and if he's wrecking someone else's vineyard, well, that's not so bad either. So.
Absolutely. Make a mistake elsewhere, just not here.
I've made enough mistakes on my own vineyard, and you constantly learn and things like that along the way as well. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. And as a man like myself, you love your aged wine. However, obviously that can sometimes come at a slightly higher price if you're looking for a midweek drink, etc. Are there any young wines, like young style wines, from a red or white varietal that you enjoy drinking, say, every other day? And if so, what are the countries or regions that you prefer during younger wines?
I think Grenaches, and Spanish Grenaches. If you can find some good Spanish Grenache, and I suppose starting to look at more the serious type rosés. So people that have going away from not having such a heavy red style, especially during the summer months.
Yes.
But for me, Grenache and Mourvedre, Mataro for us. I think looking at different varietals there, whether it comes from old world or even new world.
Yes.
That's what sort of excites me, especially the Grenache, because I think it's such a versatile varietal. But yeah, once again, you can't sort of getting into the winter months, you still can't beat Shiraz. So and the ageability of it. So
very true. All right, and. For yourself, you've sampled a lot of great wines throughout your years. Is there a bucket list wine? I know there may be many, but one that sticks out and you think, I must try that wine before?
I reckon everyone talks about I think it's the AT2 Chateau de Chem. So
yes, okay.
I think because I still like my sticky wines, but I think value for money. I think people underestimate the Tawnies and the Sherrys and the fortifieds of the world.
Oh, massively.
I really like my. I suppose I've got a good fortified stack at home, but value for money when you're picking up a wine that's potentially aged for 50 years in barrel, when you can pick it up for 70 quid, and that's just living history basically.
Yes.
In a bottle, and Seppeltsfield do it very well because we've got the 100-year-old, and I was lucky enough to get a bottle of the 100-year-old at the Barossa auction this year, and people said, "Oh, you're mad for buying it," and I said, "Well, it's 100 years old, and it cost me $6,000 to buy the bottle, and it's."
But you can lay it down for a long time as well, though. Can't you?
It's not gonna go off. It's not gonna it's not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna be the same today, tomorrow, and for the rest of its life. But I think that's something for open it up at my 50th and share it with a lot of friends. But I've had the opportunity over the years to try some really fantastic wines, thanks to a mate of Chris's, Jürgen. So
wow.
To try some of these really old Barollos and things like that as well. But
that's something too.
That's something to behold. I think it was a 48 Barolo that we had, and it was nearly as fresh as what it had been bottled. It must have been very tight, very compact wine when they actually bottled it. But I think understanding and winemakers understanding what needs to be done to create wines that are going to last lifetimes, I think is massive.
Okay,
amazing.
and on the flip side of that, what was the one bottle that is you've tried that was etched in your memory till now? You can still taste, and you're like, this is why I love wine. Whether it's prior to really getting into wine or while it's been fully immersed in wine, you tried it and you're like, this sums up why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah,
I think what really got me hooked onto wine and aged wine was basically 89 Rockford's Basket Press, and tasting that wine. And I was most probably it wasn't most probably real old at the time. It was most probably only. It was most probably only 10 years old at the time when I actually tried it, but that was my sort of first wine, that I sort of bought and collected and opened it up and got me sort of hooked onto, looking at wines. And I suppose my focus on, especially when I'm looking at the wine companies that I'm delivering to, whether it's a Glatzer or a Cliffs Ringland, a John Duval or alike, I look at what is the ageability of the wine. Why should I be paying a premium for this wine?
Yes.
And am I going to be able to enjoy it in my later years, or are my kids going to be able to enjoy it in their years? And that's what I'm really look for in a wine.
Okay. And for yourself, do you have like any mottos or mantras that you live by, whether it be personally or from the professional standpoint, or is it just happy-go-lucky and just...
Oh, it's a little bit happy-go-lucky, but it's generally go hard or go home. Give it a crack.
I agree with that.
You got to live life to the fullest, and you got to give it a decent nudge. So, it's like I said, we've been throwing quite a few challenges in the industry, just in the last couple of years with our yields, and I suppose how everything's going in the vineyard. But my to pick yourself up, and especially in 2013 we lost about 40% of our area to frost, and I said to Dad, we need to do something about this. We can't lose that much area, and he said, no, you'll never see anything like that, because that was the first time we had a major loss of that sort of nature, and then the following year we lost 70% of our area to frost. And I just said to him, I said, well, this is make or break time for us. So, we invested the following year we invested nearly $600,000 into frost mitigation devices,
wow.
and he said, you'll never see that again, and he thought I was wasting my money, and if we didn't do that, we would have lost 80% of our area to frost, and because we put in all this frost mitigation, we only lost 30% of the area. So
it was an investment that paid off.
An investment that paid off very much so in the first year that we actually put it in. But then, since then, I sort of vowed, after that, I said within 5 years, anything that is on the what we call the lowlands of Ebenezer, in the frost areas, I wasn't going to grow without frost mitigation, even if it's never been frosted. So young vines that potentially never get frosted will get a frost fan to help protect the crop. The next thing, that we sort of done after the dry years of 16 is basically say we need to get enough water. So we need enough water. So if we do have these dry years, that we can actually water and supplement the vines, so we can actually get a decent crop and get the quality, because it is very much, adding the addition of water can actually increase the quality of your fruit, because your vines don't stress. You don't lose the leaf on your vines. So, the factory that's producing all the sugar and all the flavours, you keep that on the vine. The fruit grows in a bit of shade, so it's not fully exposed to the hot sun and things like that as well. So to make sure that you got that supplementary water there to grow the best quality possible, is very important as well. So
it's
it's all these combinations. You got to. It's not just thinking about one thing. It's all, I sort of say at the beginning of the growing season, you start off with 100% capacity.
Okay.
And you everything you do after that just whittles it down. So
yes.
The environment helps you whittle it down, and all you're trying to do is create these 1%ers all the time to make sure you can get the best quality fruit. You don't start off with nothing, and the things that you do is going to make it better.
Yes.
You start off with the premium quality, and then after that, all you're doing is trying to get it as close as what you can and keep it close as you can to that 100%.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, very insightful. Thank you for that. And obviously, for yourself, if we was to talk past and present, if you could choose your ultimate 3 dinner guests, who would they be, and which 3 wines would you choose to serve?
Ultimate dinner guests, I reckon I'll most probably definitely invite my grandfather. So from the past, and I'd actually show him the wines that we're creating now. So he passed away in 2010. So a lot of the wines, and I think a lot of what we've created from the Chris Ringland from our vineyard, he didn't get to see. So to showcase those wines. From the present, I most probably couldn't go past my mate John Hughes. But we'd most probably have to go and dig out some pretty good Rieslings or something. So we'd have to, maybe go to the Mosel, go see Ergon Muller or someone like that.
Oh, wow.
And we had a great experience with him actually. July last year, myself and John actually got to sit in his lounge room and have a, I think it was an 88 Oslos that he pulled out for us to try as a cellar. Sitting in his lounge room with Egon Muller, so that was fantastic.
Yes.
But then I suppose, future, I reckon it'd be fantastic to sit down with, I suppose, not maybe with Son's generation, but the generation after that, and dig out some of the wines that I've made just now, and actually have a try those wines. Wow. To see, I've got great confidence in our wines are going to age for a long, long time. But it'd be fantastic to have a look at these wines, and see how well they have aged. And I generally say it's. when people ask me, what vintages do you like, I generally tend to like the fruit from the more difficult vintages to grow for. So, if you go back to 2013s and 14s and 15 vintages, for me it'll be 18 and 20 vintages as well.
Okay.
It's those years where 2010, 2012, they're great vintages and made fantastic wines, but from a vineyard point of view, we didn't have to do a huge amount in the vineyard. Those wines sort of made themselves. There was very little intervention that we could do, but some of the work that we did in some of those later, in some of those more difficult vintages, and see the outcomes and see some of those great wines from those more difficult vintages and things like that as well. I'm very disappointed that we most probably didn't keep some of our 2011 wines back, because it was a very difficult growing season.
Okay.
And the wines were fantastic wines if it was a Rhone Red.
Yes.
But it was a Barossa Valley Shiraz that we're making, and it had all the classic characteristics of a classic, high end Rhone Red.
Yes.
And it wasn't the style of wine that we're actually looking at doing. But 2000, you see the wine that we've made in 2016 in some of those more challenging years, 2008 in a challenging year in that as well.
Yes.
To see the outcome of those wines, I think, is fantastic.
Okay, brilliant. And a couple of non-wine questions, very basic ones. However, what would you say is one of your all-time favourite films?
Shawshank Redemption. So,
I love that film.
Yep. So that's my all-time favourite. So basically, I suppose someone that got wrongly accused and triumphed by the end. So
I don't know if you ever caught the series Prison Break. I think that was the brainchild, I think, from Shawshank Redemption. Because I was hooked on Prison Break for sure. Up until I think series 3 when they went to Panama and it got a bit
it got a bit funky after that one. I did like the Prison Break series as well. So
very good.
That was very, very smart season, and I suppose Law Abiding Citizen is a little bit little bit along the same tracks as well. That's up there in my favourite films as well. So
definitely. Okay, and music wise, what is your genres that? If you was to put your, phone on shuffle as an example, what could we expect to hear?
You'd hear quite a bit of Queen. So I'm a bit of a Queen tragic. So
yes. Did you see the film Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yeah, I've seen it several times already. So
brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So I was most probably a little bit before my time, because I was born in '75. But definitely a bit of a Queen tragic. But also I suppose a lot of those I suppose more classic pop type arrangements as well. So still like listening to Elton John.
Yes.
Sort of that sort of. I don't like the whole death metal and heavy metal, but there's odd bits and pieces that I'll pick out of it, because I do like the Hilltop Hoods. So So
and what about like any like AC/DC or?
No. I said you can always bop along to those.
Sure.
Yeah, bop along to them. But I suppose I'm most probably more your classic rock more so than your heavy rock and heavy metal. So
and that can be a bit extreme, can't it? Definitely. But I'm glad you said Queen, because when I was on the way to the Philippines with my wife and my children, it was one of the films that was on the plane. I watched it and I couldn't believe how they were portraying, Freddie Mercury in particular. And then if you've seen the Live Aid concert and you see how the film caught it, and then there's a YouTube video on there where you can actually see the live performance by Freddie Mercury and the film's take on it. You just think, wow, it's just it sort of encapsulates what it how special Queen were and how significant they were. So no, very good. And okay, as we draw to a close, just a couple more quick questions then. What does the future hold for Adrian Hoffmann and Dymchurch Vineyards?
Well, I don't think things are going to change too much for Dymchurch Vineyards or for myself. I was most probably very fortunate in my years that my dad handed over the reins to me very early. A lot of I suppose grape growers and farmers, they hang on to their property for a long time, and then their sons don't become as interested. My plan would be, as soon as my son's willing and able, and he really wants to take the bull by the horns, I'll sort of hand that on to him, and I most probably can spend a little bit more time travelling and selling the wine while I'm young and fit enough too. If I can spend rest of my years chipping weeds in the vineyard and pottering around the vineyard, or I always liked having a veggie patch, but in the last 10 years I most probably haven't had the time or anything to do that.
Sure.
So if the sun takes on the vineyard, I can most probably start up a bit more of a veggie patch again and chip around in that and grow a bit of my own produce again. So
definitely.
Yeah.
All right, and lastly as well, of course, with what's been happening in Australia, for someone like yourself, where would you recommend someone like ourselves, our viewers, our listeners, to recommend to? Is there a specific organisation over in Australia that the money would definitely go to? Who would need the help? Is there a specific?
I think the Red Cross foundations and the Salvos, I think they're the ones they're the organisations that will actually get the money to the people that are actually required and will actually need the support. I think the biggest thing for especially in the bushfire and the bushfire appeals, it's not what's going to happen in the next 3 months and 6 months. Whole communities are going to have to be rebuilt. So, and that's going to take years and years and years. And that's going to take a big policy change from, I suppose, government and how the government reacts. And we've got a 3-tiered government system in Australia as well. Right. But I think the biggest support that you can actually give to those communities is in most probably 2, 3, 4 years time is actually what we've been encouraged to do as Australians is actually get back into those communities and spend money within those communities. Okay. Because when you start spending money within those communities, they'll distribute the funds. They'll get to employ people.
Yes.
They'll keep people within the communities, because the hardest thing in Australia in general is the support of rural communities and keeping people in the country. We're all going to very centralised populations, whether it's in the big cities, whether it's Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane.
Yes.
But to keep people in those rural communities, I think, is very important. And the one thing you can do from a support point of view is actually go visit those communities, stay within those communities when you come to Australia. The big draw card is always Sydney and Melbourne, but yes. When people come out to the Barossa or go into the Adelaide Hills, their money that comes in and their money that gets spent, basically triples in the economy, because it gets spent in that business that will then spend it within the community, and then the community will spend it again. Yes. Going forward. So that's really where the support is going to come from, and it's most probably not this year or the next year, especially hopefully my wife's not listening and she won't hold me to this, but definitely most probably in two years' time,
sure.
Get back onto Kangaroo Island. If we can do it earlier than that, but there's a lot of rebuilding to be done there. But to support our local community and going there and actually visiting and spending some of our money there and on the island, on the community, and they'll work their way through it, and just to show that they have the support of people, I think is really important.
Oh, brilliant. It's always good to give back, isn't it?
Yeah.
Definitely, for sure. But fine. Well, Adrian, thank you very much once again. Enjoy the rest of your stay here in the UK and throughout Europe, and many more safe travels. And that's it from me today on behalf of Colts Boutique. So until then, all the best. Thank you. See you next time.